Thank you for joining me today, guys, at a lunchtime on a Friday afternoon. Um, Today, I will be talking about collaboration best practices within data science teams using the power of data science notebooks. Okay, let's see. As a quick introduction of myself, I'm Megan. I'm a data advocate at DeepNote, where I am responsible for creating resources for users and developers of DeepNote to use the product better. Prior to DeepNote, I was a data scientist at Narrator, where I was helping to build advanced analytics tooling for data analysts and data scientists. First, what is DeepNote? It is essentially a data science notebook that helps teams collaborate so that they can tackle the hardest data problems together. DeepNote allows you to combine SQL, Python, R, and no-code visualization blocks together. It has over 50 native integrations that allow you to query from the most popular data sources. You can also use our AI suite of tools to generate, edit, and fix bugs in your code, and also take it to the next level of generating an entire notebook for you just with a simple prompt. And lastly, you can turn the insights that you get from the notebook into apps or dashboards with a click of a button. And so when DeepNote was founded in 2019, there were a couple of questions that were top of mind that we were thinking a lot about and that we wanted to have answered. And they were, how can we make data more accessible and understandable? How can we facilitate conversations around data and insights? And how can we help data teams collaborate better? At the same time, we were also noticing some major trends going on in the data space. For example, the explosion of data roles, more remote first workforce, and also the rise of the citizen data scientist. And for those of you who have never heard that term, we think of those people as business personas or somebody who is not traditionally trained in data science, who still has to interact with data and data science principles in any way to be able to do their everyday jobs. And at the center of all three of those major movements that were going on is data democratization. We saw data democratization as the key difference between this state where the data science process only involves those who are considered pure data scientists. And this after state where you are involving the people who are outside of that traditional data org, and this is where the citizen data scientists come in. We needed to know where to focus our efforts and put our heads down to build something meaningful that could tackle all three of these questions that we were thinking a lot about. And we started to crack at those questions by bringing in the answer of data science notebooks. And when you hear the phrase data science notebooks, apparently 80% of data scientists think about and use Jupyter notebooks specifically. However, when the rest of the world hears the term Jupyter notebooks, they usually think about a very niche tool that mostly serves technical audiences only. And going back to these three trends that we were observing at the time, we noticed that there was a gap in tools that served the plenty of citizen data science roles that were coming online that also happened to be remote first roles. And that's where collaborative data science notebooks come in. Our prediction is that Collaborative data science notebooks is the answer to unlocking not only true collaboration within data science teams, but also between those regular and citizen data science teams. In order to predict the future of notebooks and specifically collaborative notebooks, however, we would need to go back in time and understand its history. And then from there, we will cover some of the best practices that we recommend for achieving that ideal future state where there is fluidity between those regular data scientists and the citizen data scientists. The very first notebook was introduced in 1988 by Wolfram Mathematica, and it very much targeted a technical crowd. And because of that very niche nature of it, it took a backseat to spreadsheets. Spreadsheets started with the introduction of VisiCalc in 1979, followed by Lotus 123 in 1983. But as history would have it, both of those would be beat out by Excel in 1987 when it was introduced, which of course that remains the market leader in spreadsheets. And with that, spreadsheets really became the preferred business application and notebooks really faded to the background. That is until Jupyter came along with the release of IPython 0.12 in December of 2011, almost exactly 12 years ago to this day. And so that came along 20 years after that first notebook was released in 1988 by Wolfram Mathematica. This new browser-based interactive notebook provided a cell-based execution workflow that was really meeting the market demand at the time for a new way to analyze large volumes of unstructured data that a spreadsheet could not handle due to the infamous 1 million row limit per sheet. But what happened between 2011 and now to make notebooks that preferred format for data scientists? To understand the notebooks of today, however, we have to dive into understanding the trade-off between usability and power that all technical tools encounter. Historically, spreadsheets have sat closer to the usability end of this spectrum because they're so easy to use that Excel users don't even realize they're writing software with it. However, they are hard to scale because of, again, that 1 million row limit. However, notebooks and IDEs, on the other hand, sit closer to the power end of the spectrum because of the high ceiling of what you can do with code, but they also have a much higher barrier to entry. Somewhere in the middle of this spectrum is an ideal tool with the accessibility and simplicity of a spreadsheet, but also the scalability and power of code. So we enter modern notebooks to bridge that gap with these following critical elements to be able to serve today's data science teams. We have a text component for you to add context to the analysis that you're conducting. We have SQL queries to be able to bring in the data that you're working with. You also have code to add the logic around those queries, a visualization layer to present the code to your business stakeholders, and lastly, a commenting capability to allow for feedback and iteration on those presentations that you're giving. So you may think that data scientists are the only ones who can benefit from these modern notebooks. And for all intents and purposes, I've been saying data scientist, data scientist, data scientist throughout this presentation. But in addition to data scientists being those first order users who are power users of notebooks, there are also ML ops folks and data engineers who are included in that first order, even though they are doing things that are completely different in the data science spectrum. And additionally, within each of these different types of personas, there are also different proficiency levels. Beginners are going to require a lot more handholding when it comes to building models and building reports, whereas the more advanced personas, with them, collaboration would shift more towards the needs of reproducibility, versioning, and so on. Some other skills to call out that really distinguish those beginners from advanced users are things like working with Git, managing clusters, and writing quality Python code. And so now that we have a better understanding of the people who are using notebooks, let's take a look at how they collaborate. Historically, data science teams have been siloed off in a centralized team within an org to do whatever it is that data science teams do in what feels like a black box to those outsiders, independent of what those outsider teams are doing. Collaboration, for all intents and purposes up to this point, has meant the collaboration that is happening within members sitting in those data science teams. But a more ideal level of collaboration is when data science teams are empowered to really collaborate with those other non-technical teams outside of the data org to be able to enrich their findings with domain knowledge, make their findings discoverable throughout the organization, and also bring in those citizen data scientists into their workflows. And all of those things are really only possible when those non-technical citizen data science teams can also communicate back with the data scientists. But in reality, the ideal state of collaboration is held back by different teams, different work mediums. For example, if an analyst wants to send their model to an engineer for implementation, but the engineer can't figure out how to run it, or they most definitely cannot figure out how to leave feedback on the model, then that ideal state of collaboration that I just highlighted comes crashing down. And so what we need is a fundamentally different medium from the tools of the past. We really see notebooks as that solution that can bring together siloed tools and practitioners to be the center of gravity for that vision that I have outlined. So now we're going to cover best practices for working together in a data team so that we can get to that vision. These are going to be principles that you should follow no matter the type of project that you're working on using notebooks. Okay. 1, there should be a place where data scientists can just write code when, say, an idea pops into their heads or they need to do some very quick and dirty exploratory analysis. Plenty of data scientists have Jupyter installed on their own machine, and they've figured out the most efficient way to run it for their own personal workflows. But this is not a good practice when the company needs to scale. And so when you turn to cloud-based notebooks, that those individual setups are prepared for scalability. And some other examples of some good cloud-based notebook platforms are AWS SageMaker and the Google AI platform. The second principle, notebooks should not only be read-only. Those notebooks should serve as a place where you can collaborate by easily making big or small changes to others' code without having to go back and forth over email or Slack or some other medium separate from that coding medium. Even worse than read-only notebooks would be screenshots of code in notebooks, and that is probably even more common. My third best practice for working with notebooks is that there should be a robust way to do version control and track changes. because with collaboration comes higher chances of accidents happening between team members, like possibly deleting somebody else's code. And that may or may not have happened to a friend of mine. And that friend had her butt saved by version control features. Fourth, in order to make your notebooks reproducible to hand off to any collaborators, you need to have explicit documentation of the requirements. Some of those best practices for this include never using local files, and those cloud environments really force you to do that. Also, follow the Python best practice of listing your packages used in a requirements text file, no matter the type of analysis you're doing. And fifth, and probably the most critical way to facilitate collaboration is being able to leave feedback for your collaborators so that you can iterate, that you can create an iterative process together. And so given these, another set of best practices that I will be going through may not be as necessary to follow if you're a data science persona that is mostly concerned with exploratory programming. However, if you are writing code that needs to end up in production, which a lot more data science people these days are concerned with, then we have also some software development best practices. First, there is no way around writing code and tests. It's absolutely a must. But fortunately, notebooks make that easier by providing that text layer for you to write that all out. Second, log all your experiments as you're doing them. Notebooks today, like DeepNote, offer integrations with hosted experimentation tracking tools like TensorBoard, MLflow, and Great Expectations. Third, split your development and production environments whenever possible, and a lot more data scientists these days are finding themselves needing to do that so that they can work with data and sanitize it in a secure development environment that is in a separate place within your servers. Especially when you are collaborating with others, parameterizing your notebooks is super important. This means putting all of your inputs at the top of your notebook so that when a collaborator comes in, they know the variables that they have to change within the first few lines of code, rather than making them hunt for those requirements hundreds of lines down in your notebook. And lastly, think about continuous integration with each change that you make to your code. There should be robust tests to ensure that you are not breaking anything down the line, which could impact all of your collaborators. And so with these coding and notebook best practices in mind, we are confident that we'll get to that vision where data science is embedded throughout organizations, and the citizen data scientist really becomes just as important in the data science process as traditional data scientists are. And that is it. Would love to open the floor for some questions now. Sure. So why is it so difficult to integrate Git into Git workflows? And so what we were finding here at DeepNote is that those Python files, when you upload them to Git, they are very static pieces of document that, yes, they're brought into those Git workflows, and that's supposed to facilitate collaboration, but that collaboration is done in a medium that is outside of where that Python coding is happening in those files. And so you can still have a lot of asynchronous, you can still have a lot of those issues come into play where versioning is happening somewhere else and people are working with not the latest Python file. And so with the data science notebooks that DeepNote is creating, we're really ensuring that the versioning and the coding and the documentation steps are all done in one place rather than having to like upload it somewhere else. That is another source of truth that you have to deal with. Okay, second question, if we could bring that one up, from Tony. Yes, so DeepNote does help with versioning of data. I should probably have, let me pull up a quick demo and sign into that. Okay, if I bring this to this screen, if we can, hold on, let me share. Oh, okay. So the question is, does DeepNote help with versioning of data? Also, the answer is yes. And so let me share that on the screen so that this question can disappear and I can show you what it looks like in DeepNote. Here. You see here my notebook with its visualization blocks and exploratory data frame exploratory features that are natively built in. But also up top, we have a lot of the features that work outside of just the coding that's happening within your notebook. And here we have the versioning, and you see a very detailed log of everything that I've done. If you have multiple users working in the same notebook, you'll see them pop up here as bubbles, similar to Google Docs, if they are in here at the same time. But this versioning will track everybody else's changes as well, and you can always roll back to any of those prior versions. Okay, any other questions that we have? Okay, so I don't think that there are any more questions, but I'm happy to hang around for the last couple to answer anybody else's that they might think of last minute. And okay, here's another one. What does kernel configuration look like for multi-language notebooks? So I probably can't speak to the super technical aspects of this, but DeepNote definitely does support multiple languages within one notebook. Do I show it in here? Okay, maybe not. Let me show you guys another example of a different notebook where we do have, like, say, SQL and Python within the same notebook. So you'll notice here I'm in my own personal workspace, but I also have access to a bunch of other workspaces. And workspaces are how in DeepNote you organize all your team's work. Settings and permissions that are set in one workspace will persist through all projects within the same workspace, so that everybody can collaborate on the same level and they are starting from the same baseline. But let's say if I jump into this example notebook of a churn prediction dashboard, I have multiple notebooks organized within my project, and I can jump to each of these. But let's say in my exploratory data analysis notebook here, you can see I have SQL happening here. And let's see, where's my Python happening? Some pretty basic Python that's happening here. And jumping into the actual machine learning step where we're building a random forest classifier, this is where you'll see a lot of the, this will be a strictly Python notebook, but you'll also notice that there are different types of blocks, such as these input blocks, where you can adjust these inputs and the rest, and those changes will persist throughout this notebook. And that makes it a truly interactive space for both the people who are those technical personas and any stakeholders who are coming in here and want to play with the models themselves. So you can see all this, the Python here, and then in my summary notebook, again, you'll see a mix of these input blocks, SQL blocks, and Python blocks all together, and most notably this interactive no-code visualization block. So I think this this summary notebook is really where you showcase all of those different types of blocks working together. Let's see, another question that we have, is there a Git repo underneath DeepNote? So we do have an integration built out with GitHub so that you can easily push your DeepNote notebooks to GitHub as well. In terms of the specific repo, though, I would have to dig that up. If we have a DeepNote app, how can we share a workspace with a non-DeepNote user? Is there external link sharing? Yes. So great question. If I could flash this back up. Yes. So you're one step ahead of me. So these apps here are, like I said, they can be built with a click of a button off of any notebook that you have. And so with this notebook, the summary notebook, I've already created an app here. So, but if I hadn't created this, there should be a button to like create app up here, and you can configure exactly how you want that notebook to be shown, whether you want to have all your code blocks and your output blocks shown, or you only want the output blocks shown, or if you want to configure it to be like full widescreen, or if you wanted to like have all your blocks centered in the screen like this. But that's all configurable. And then I would create app, and this is what the app would look like, where if I select this input here, it should run the rest of those notebooks given that input. But to answer your question about how we can share this with non-DeepNote users, once that runs, I'll flash that back up on the screen. But if I edit app, you'll see these are the configurations that I can adjust. And you can see sharing. I can either make the app have the same permissions as the underlying notebook, or I can make it shareable to anyone with this link, or completely public. And if you select public, this app goes up into what is known as like your DeepNote public profile. And similar to things like Kaggle, you would have a page that is out there for the world to see, displaying all of your public projects. But if you don't choose this public project, then the most common type of sharing is anyone with a link, so that you can simply copy this link to, oh, okay, well, that's a bug. But yeah, so we could copy this link and send it to anybody, and they can see the whole app and the underlying notebook.